now why we're here. Our presenter today is Greg Futrell from Entry Point Consulting. His background includes experience with international trade and logistics, and he acted as the Export Compliance Officer for a Fortune 100 company. Greg has 13 implementations and upgrades of SAP GTS under his belt, plus experience with other SAP solutions. So with that, I will turn it over to Greg.
Good afternoon, everybody. We'll just dive right in. We have quite a few slides, and I want to leave plenty of time for a tour of the product, as well as a question and answer period at the end. So our agenda today, I'll let you read the slides, but basically we're going to talk about the design and some technology decisions, and then we're going to talk, basically going to spend most of the time doing a tour of the application, and we'll finish up with our standard ASUG presentation, key learnings. What distinguishes Entry Point in the GTS arena is our trade knowledge and experience, and our regular communication with each other, all of our team members. We also collaborate on keeping our best practices current, and we are very willing to evangelize GTS. It's the most robust trade compliance solution on the planet. We also keep our community actively engaged with our blog and our educational sessions like this one. We're really proud that ASUG and SAP find our projects and clients interesting enough to continually invite us to present at annual conferences and webinars. And we have over 60 clients in 24 countries that we've helped implement GTS solutions. So the story of our client today, due to a company policy, they could not agree to co-present with us, and we could not get permission to use their names. So all references in the presentation are for a generic company. The project is still active, and we're moving into phase 2 very soon. So the image you see here represents their strategy of global trade compliance coverage through regions across the globe. The conditions that made this effort of the miscellaneous shipments application necessary included this breadth of coverage and the number of locations, but also the number of different systems employed globally, and then the relative lack of visibility of items being shipped outside that system or those systems. An internal audit revealed miscellaneous shipments as one of their highest areas of compliance risk. They had already recognized the need to control various ad hoc processes that existed to reduce their exposure to potential compliance violations. One idea was that if we controlled the generation of a commercial invoice form, we could realize more success on a global level. And interestingly, the business units were all supportive of this idea from the start. One of the other reasons listed on this slide, the other reasons listed on this slide are generally true for any organization wondering if controlling miscellaneous shipments is really worth the effort. One of the things we did was to build a matrix of each business unit and all the different things they shipped. Now, the images on this page are not really specific to any of our clients anywhere. Every category here represents something found in a miscellaneous shipment from the client for which the solution was created. We got a small team together, and we began gathering requirements. Many of the objectives stated by the IT department and the compliance group, we found some common ground among them. They each wanted a solution that was robust and comprehensive, but wouldn't require a lot of new headcount to maintain or to manage the application. The 4 bullets at the bottom of the list on the right, they really were the guiding mantra throughout the project so far for our design, deployment, and our testing. So it had to be easy. I included this slide because as you review the presentation later at your convenience, we want you to focus on how the solution we're about to demonstrate really has its foundation in these 3 key purposes of GTS. Those of you who've used GTS for a while already understand this, Most compliance folks want to focus on the control aspects of GTS, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's a primary thing, of course. But we also want people to realize the potential for GTS to speed throughput if it's meshed correctly within the supply chain. So this was another one of the ideas that we kept thinking about as we designed this application. We'll talk shortly about the business process design here. This is a very high-level environmental proposal. Our main idea, it's a simplified diagram, of course. It shows how information flows into GTS, and in some cases how it flows out. But it really focuses on the one prime directive we had for this entire design. Everything flows through the APIs for master data and transactions. This helped us save a lot of time and a lot of money, actually. The boxes at the top represent the traditional SAP and non-SAP systems that have a lot of data, a lot of volume. They're big systems. So we said, well, why not mimic how those operate? And if the boxes at the bottom show you highlighted miscellaneous shipments, there is another side of the application, and we're not going to talk about that one today, but it operates very, very similarly to the miscellaneous shipments application in that all of the data comes in through the API. It creates a documented GTS that undergoes compliance screening, and it also creates an export declaration from which we manage our export documents for those shipments that are not domestic shipments. One of the critical elements in the business process design was to avoid the need for many extra trade compliance personnel to manage the extra transactions that were going to be processed through GTS. In the requirements gathering process, we understood that since miscellaneous shipments were already happening, there were people within each business unit already recognized as subject matter experts. So to spread the load as evenly as possible, we designed these roles so that they would share that workload. Now, these are highly simplified versions of very detailed process flows, but each column represents a process flow. The originator does those activities to get the data into the system, and then the subject matter expert and the trade compliance operations people share the process of getting new master data into the system. We'll talk about that in a moment. Then each subject matter expert for the business unit, for each business unit, they have tasks within what we call work lists. And they manage the creation of new partner master data, and they also review the transactions as well. So that's pretty much the business process design at a very high level. We wanted to talk about one important thing was a technology decision. Early on in the process, we had to decide how we were going to get data into the system. So our first thinking was that we would make it easy on the originator, and we would use SAP Adobe Interactive Forms. But the licensing fees that were quoted by SAP were they were enough to at least make us look at other options, if for no other reason, just to justify the cost of the processes. So then we had consideration of their in-house HTML department in the IT group, and we talked about that as an option. So a decision matrix was developed, and we listed a lot of factors. We weighted some of them, and then we did the math on each one of them, and we ranked each one of them. And the winner came out as WebDimPro. I know some people are surprised by that. This is an image of our Launchpad screen. It was built with SAP NetWeaver WebDimPro, and it uses what we call Floor Plan Manager that provides the user interface objects. And this is all SAP technology. All the programming is object-oriented. For example, users must complete a first-time registration before they will see the login field shown here at the upper right. This section, I know it's kind of small on the screen, but this section at the upper right where it shows where the email and the password is put in, users have to register before they can even see that object. Then you see the links at the lower left, and we'll see these a little more clearly later, but the links at the lower left are kind of our forward-thinking approach. Ultimately, we'd like to generate web services that link this application directly into FedEx, DHL, or UPS. So we've not resolved all the questions related to those planned features. we have some questions about secure transmissions and firewall transits and that kind of thing. But in general, this application theoretically can do all of that. So why WebDinPro? After again doing the matrix, we ran into these advantages and disadvantages. I'm not going to read them off the list. I'll just tell you that the different client bullet is about how it can run on browsers, mobile devices. There's what they call a widget engine. The UI elements, there's a wealth of functionality requiring only configuration and not programming. And in fact, we used a earlier version of Floor Plan Manager, so there are more up-to-date UI interface functionality out there now. The large-scale app development is supported by adding multiple grouping layers atop the Java packages. And I'm not going to pretend, I'm a functional consultant, so I'm not going to pretend that I understand exactly what all that means, but our technical guys wanted me to include that in case there were any techies on the call today. We generate diverse services for external access, like standard RFCs, and then Java EE and web service data models. And then security, that was another big factor in our design, and we are, of course, able to use internal SAP GTS security. The one big factor to me in advantage was that it appears to be SAP's direction in the future, because they're already employing this for vendor declaration maintenance in the NAFTA trade preference processing and the risk management in GTS. So that's kind of an out-of-the-box solution. It requires configuration, of course, and generating the web services, but you basically send a link to a vendor. They use the link to log back into GTS and maintain their vendor declarations. So we felt it was a good decision to go in this direction. Now, there were some disadvantages. We know that it's an SAP proprietary code base, and we also discovered that custom HTML is not possible with WebDinPro applications. So you can't layer HTML on top of it. It's not meant to be a fancy design. We're not meant to be like a fancy web page that has a lot of images and flashing lights and things. It's very utilitarian, but it looks good. There were some SAP limitations that propagated. For example, the need to click enter in some of the ALV grid-based views, in order to commit something into an entry. You can't just click go and then have that data resident in the table. You have to actually click enter before you click next. And then there were some reports, we've not seen any yet, but there have been some reports of slow rendering with tables that have a lot more data in them. I did provide additional information in this link. When you get the presentation, you should be able to just link to that hyperlink or just copy it in your URL, and it'll take you to the SAP online documentation for NetWeaver and WebDinPro. Just to show you that we weren't biased on this, we did do a past solution for another client using HTML. We've been in this rodeo before about trying to find solutions for miscellaneous shipments, running them through GTS. And in our 2008 ASUG presentation at Sapphire on this, and I provided the link for that in this slide, you can see some of the solutions we had. One of the best we had was creating a web input page with Microsoft.NET. Now, all I'll say about this is that I think it's still a good solution, but it's not for every company. And in fact, for the current client we had, with the number of business units and divisions they had, this web page would not have been tenable for them, because we would have had to build separate web pages for each interface. So going through build and realization, I wanted to bring this to everybody's attention. And the first thing you might say on this is, whoa, this thing took a year to build and deploy? Well, I did want to explain the details. All I wanted to do here was to show the things that happened during the process. The resources that were assigned to this project over this period of time were not full-time. So this doesn't represent, full-time resources all the time on each of these months. My estimate would be that if we had to do it as a single project full-time, it would probably take anywhere from a third to half as much time as we're displaying here. We also had some constraints of what we call the SDLC, the Software Development Lifecycle Process. Some of you may be familiar with that. It's slightly different than the standard SAP, what we call ASAP process of project management. So there are some differences in an SDLC process. There are pros and cons to every type of project management process. There were a lot of pros with SDLC, but one of the cons for this particular project was it did induce some delays in the way we would have probably normally gone about putting the application in and designing it and building it. We're currently underway with enhancements, so we're including support for multiple languages and multiple languages in the output forms as required by some of the non-U.S. countries. So how it works, this is just a high-level overview of kind of what the functionality is about. It resides within GTS. It has data and a mix of Z-tables. We generate the web UI, and we call it, and this is an earlier slide we developed, we were calling it the shipping request application, but now everybody refers to it as the miscellaneous shipments application. The main thing is that it mimics an external system. So we really configured it as a distinct logical system group. That way the part numbers, the product numbers that we put in the system, they're only seen by the miscellaneous shipments application and only used by that application. We did have to do one dummy RFC because whenever you rescreen an object for license control, GTS wants to push data back to the external system regarding the status of the document. So we had to kind of trick it as well as that. In GTS, of course, we're using all standard functionality. By mapping it through the API and making it look like it was coming from a standard SAP system as much as possible, we're able to just configure GTS as if it is an external system. Everything works just like it does with a normal SAP system. And we use a standard export declaration. We added something called Flex Forms, which is one of our solutions, in-house solutions to help manage PDFs a little easier. So in other words, if we want to change something on a PDF output, you don't necessarily have to go through an Adobe designer and then pass it up as transports through. You can actually do some of this change on the fly in the production system, and it is, it's secure. So we've talked about it enough. Let's actually take a tour. I'll show you what we ended up building, and all reports right now, the client is very happy with how it's turned out. The tests are very good, and it seems to be able to support all of the things that we want to do. Perhaps the nicest feature in the entire application, I'll get to that, in the next slide. This is the Launchpad options. I promised you that we'd see a larger view of that big screen we saw back on slide 16. This just explains sort of what the different features are. So once the originator's logged in and they come to this section of the application, they have these options for managing documents. Of course, they can create a document, fresh, a new document. They can display anytime. These other features are meant to work with those documents that they've already created, or to help them, manage their time. For example, with drafts, if you're right in the middle of creating a document and suddenly you have to go meet with your boss or something, you can save it as a draft, come back to it later, and finish it up there. You can create with reference using previous documents that you've done as the model. In fact, we use that a lot in testing because all we have to do is pull up one for reference, and we have a complete document all done. We just change one thing on it, and then rerun the test. Probably the nicest feature in the whole thing is the guided activity framework, and that's this section up at the top of the view here. You'll see a little expanded view in another slide here in a moment. But basically, we're taking users, we're showing them all along the way what step that they're in, so that they know exactly where they are in the process all the time. It allows the originator to jump directly to other locations in the process that they want to. So they can jump directly from number 3 to number 5 if they want. Most of the time they wouldn't necessarily want to do that, but they can. The search feature is just another floor plan manager object, and it's built on top of standard search features for those fields which are part of the master data. So if you go into the search feature, you're actually going to be searching as if you were in GTS searching in the product master. And let's say you don't find a new product. We'll talk about how they find products in just a moment, I think the next slide, in fact. But if they don't find one that they can use, then they can propose a new product, and it allows them to enter in text about a product, and then someone else can actually create that product as master data. So the initial screen for product selection what we wanted to do here was make it sort of like the autotrader.com concept. In a previous slide, we saw the feature near the top right for creating new products. So we hope they don't have to do that too often, because the idea is we're going to preload a list of genericized part numbers, and then we classify them in GTS and have them represent things that originators might ship as ad hoc items. So, for example, rather than having 20 products in the system representing, each representing a Dell laptop, an HP laptop, a Macintosh laptop, Lenovo, and so on, we just create one product master called laptop. We might have to create some extra ones to differentiate between ones with encryption or something like that, but generally we can come to a sort of genericized product ID there. So in general, it doesn't matter what brand it is, but just how big. It doesn't matter how big the screen is and all that. So one product name tends to work. Now, in addition, we decided early on about this autotrader.com, and I'll get into that in a second. You'll see on the left side of the page we have these categories and attributes over here. And the next slide shows you how that works. I take that back. All right. So in the product categories, we maintain these in standard GTS configuration, and then through one of the objects, they show up here on the screen. What happens is, for example, if I click this button, it then limits the view over here of the products to only the things that are in that category, or I can even limit it further, for example, by clicking on an attribute, and then it would only let me see the ones that are not only just in this category, but only the ones with that attribute assigned to them. So I can quickly do either searches, or I can use this list over here to very quickly find the item that I'm trying to send. And then all I have to do is add it. And once I add it, I go to the product confirmation screen, and this is where the sort of the shopping cart is reviewed and finalized. And we're not buying, we're actually shipping, but we felt that shopping cart icon that we had at the top of the page was something familiar to people. So trade compliance may ultimately provide some links within this application to help the user determine things like value. And one of our future enhancements includes adding a comment field. This is something that the originator can use to communicate more details to the business unit subject matter expert, or either to the TC Ops person, who will then complete the export declaration within GTS. And then that's what produces the commercial invoice and all that. So the data flow starts with the originator, and then if they can't provide all the information here, it gets updated by the BU SME and then by the trade compliance ops people at later points in the process. The next point along the guided activity framework is where we define the ship from. And of course, by listing the foreign trade orgs and the plants, the legal units in GTS, they can use the drop selection list to select those. They can even save one as their default if they want. So that way they get to this screen, and if it's shipping from the same place every time, they really don't have to do anything except click next, because it'll already accept that location as their default. But we also added features to allow them to enter their own shipping locations. So that My Addresses tab, we had a lady who works out of an office in Maine, and that's her home plant, but she also frequently works out of another location, and she needs to be able to ship from both places. So by using this feature, she's going to be able to do that. The shipment destination detailed screen, this is where originators may select from master data, which is replicated in GTS, taken from their ERP systems. So, for example, in the main ERP system, you already have names and addresses of customers that you would normally ship to. Why not replicate those in the system? And we do. We replicate them as part of the logical system group for the miscellaneous shipment system. That way users can use the drop lists in here and search for familiar customer names and addresses. But they can also add their own. Another feature we had here, especially in international trade, you generally always have to declare who the ultimate consignee is. So rather than doing that as a new business partner all the time, we set up a feature so that they can add them as attention for partners, and these are add-ons to the regular address. mapped into the export declaration as the ultimate consignee. They can create their own new business partners. All of these business partners undergo SPL screening as well. The final review screen is the summary screen is where all of the data is presented into a single view. And again, I know that's kind of small on your screen, but I had to do this to capture all of the view that you can see there. You've got the ship from, the ship to, and then at the bottom you can see the items listed there, and then the totals for each one. So it's kind of a final check place. And of course, from here, if you had to change something, like in a product, you could jump straight back to point number 1 on the guided activity framework. Once they hit submit, they move on to a confirmation screen. Now, this was grayed out in the GAF, in the guided activity framework before, but now you can see we moved to the confirmation screen and all the other steps are grayed out now. This doesn't mean that the originator can't change anything. They can always go back to the Launchpad screen and pull up a transaction and make changes using the change functionality. But once they submit it here, they get a confirmation page that you're seeing here. They also get that little icon, which is they can pull it up as a PDF view, and they can either take screenshots of that or they can print it, on their own printers. So what happens next? They've submitted it now. So what happens next after that? So if there are any new products or new partners in the transaction, the business unit subject matter expert or the TC Ops person who processes those data before they come here to what you're seeing as the transaction work list, they would have to get in and go to the work lists for new products and new partners. And they would first process those data in as master data before they would come to the transaction work list and actually push the transaction through to GTS. And this doesn't happen in a linear fashion. We don't have a process where the originator creates the transaction and then the BUSME comes in and does something, and then the trade compliance person creates the export declaration. These all happen sort of in separate silos, because you might have 20 originators creating shipments during a day, and then the BUSME might only go into their work list 3 times a day or something. So all of this happens independently of each other. But the work lists are where the transactions get sort of validated and cleaned up if necessary before they're actually sent to GTS. So you can see that we have the functions for validating and then posting to GTS on this screen. The search features, the query feature is pretty nice at the top. It allows them to save their own queries if they want as standard queries, so that every day they can come in and execute the same query over and over. So once the business unit subject matter expert processes the transaction, an email goes out to the originator, and this contains a finalized copy of the confirmation. But it also provides information to expect a set of output documents soon. And these documents will accompany the actual items into either the shipping area of the plant, or if they're like if they're home office workers, it would go with them to the local FedEx or UPS store in some cases. Now, FedEx and UPS may not actually use those documents, but at least it provides the details that they would need to be able to get the information into their systems to ship that. So what were our key learnings? Well, the main thing was that we wanted to centralize miscellaneous shipments processes. And while you may think, well, that's kind of a no-brainer, that's why I'm here at the webinar, because I want to learn about that, and that's what we want to do too. Not every company wants to do this, but the main thing was we were doing GTS already, and we said, this makes sense. It was identified as a big gap for the company. So we also, the second major thing about this was that we realized that it was not generally a lot of added work. Now, yeah, there's some added work in the system now, but generally these tasks were already being done by people. They were using Excel sheets and Word documents and things like that. So the work was already sort of being done. We think that with whatever added task we might have added in this process, we did a corresponding reduction of effort by giving them an automated system, something that helps them save time through the product selection and the partner selection processes within the application. WebDem Pro is a new mindset. It really is. My tech guys, wanted me to make sure that I said on the presentation that, it's not just something you're going to get online and learn about. You need to really get a little training in WebDem Pro if you're going to use this. But once you do, you have a whole new world open to you as far as providing a front end for GTS. So we would, we'd like to help anybody who needs to understand that better. And then, of course, our last slide is our contact information. And I think we have plenty of time for Q&A now. I'm not going to answer any questions that tell you exactly how to design it, but I'll be glad to take on any questions that you want to talk about as far as the process and the build and that kind of thing.
All right, thanks so much, Greg. If you have any questions, you can type them into the chat on the right-hand corner of your screen, or if you'd like to ask them over the phone lines, you can press *6 to unmute your line. Once again, that's *6.
Hi, this is Sabina. I'm from LSI, and I have a question because actually we need to implement exactly a similar solution that you had. Our biggest concern was actually the material master. From our business side, we were told that we need to create for every single detailed product a material master, and you seem to say that a generic product worked out. Could you elaborate on it? Because we needed to have the specifics, like let's say the T-shirt example. A specific T-shirt had a different HTS than size S than in size M or XL, and therefore we couldn't just create a generic T-shirt. So how did you do this?
So that's a very good question. Need to make sure I was not on mute. That's a very good question. And you're exactly right. The dividing lines for the product master, the effort that we made on defining product masters, really falls along lines of HTS and ECCN. So that was the kind of the genius that one of our team members came up with as far as the original design for this was that you can get product naming down to a generic level, but you still have to break it across those lines of HTS and ECCN. So, for example, you might in the garment industry there, you are going to have several different versions. But the thing is, you might just go with the generics of, T-shirt small, T-shirt large, T-shirt medium, that kind of thing. And so you would only have to have 4 or 5 part numbers as opposed to maybe 50 part numbers or 100 part numbers that you have in your ERP, which represents all of the different colors and all of the different thread counts and all of that kind of stuff. So what you want to do is to try to break it down to its lowest common denominator to say, okay, these are 100% cotton T-shirts and they're different from the polyester T-shirts, so we're going to have maybe 10 product masters. We'll have to have small, large, medium, extra large on the cotton side. We'll have to have the same thing on the polyester side. So we've got 8 product masters for those things now, and that's kind of how we thought about it. So it's like my example with laptops. We really kind of came down to only 2 laptops. There are laptops that are laptops, and there are laptops with encryption in them. And so you've got different things there that are going on. Of course, that's really simplified. As we go along, we may find that we have to create a few more types of laptops because one may have a type of memory allowance in it that is large enough to warrant a certain ECCN because it has high processing speed, that kind of stuff. But those are the things that we'll cross those bridges when we come to them. So rather than replicating a lot of detailed product masters in the system, we wanted to try to break them down into as small a group as we could. I mean, a screwdriver is a screwdriver, right? You might have one that's made out of graphite and one that's made out of steel, but then you've only got 2 product numbers in your system instead of 40.
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
This is Seema Shankar from Fuse Network Systems. And we are actually also looking into something very similar. We run ECC6 and GTS, and we were wondering what is Floor Manager available with ECC6, or is it something that is a separate purchase that is required? And this is more a techie question.
It is more of a techie question, Seema, but I think I'm sure it's not a purchase. It's part of the NetWeaver offerings.
Okay.
WebDim Pro is basically the engine that generates the web services and that kind of thing. Floor Manager was just a set of user interface objects. So basically, you plug the objects into the design where you want a certain thing to happen, and then you sort of program. There's some back-end programming that brings the object, into view of the tables and the things. So there's some ABAP code on the table side of things, but the floor plan manager is basically an object-oriented thing, so that you would just sort of map it to a few lines of code. I don't want to overstate. I don't want to make it sound too easy either, because it was not. We had a lot of we crossed a lot of ground as pioneers as far as learning how to use it. But as you can see from the finished result, it really looks good and it works well. So.
Yeah, it is. It does have that neat. Rather than the rectangular SAP look, it looks a little more different. So we were wondering if Floor Manager was the reason that you could manage all those neat rounded functionality, rounded looks and things like that.
It is. Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
And is it something that that is available on the SAP desktop client, or is it something that you have to do on a NetWeaver desktop suite or a development platform? Floor Manager, is it something that is available on ECC, like how we have transaction codes on ECC? Is it something that is available on the ECC client itself, like a transaction? Because we've tried a little bit with WebDim Pros, but we have not used Floor Manager.
Yeah, I'm going to say that it is available at ECC, and with ECC, I'm not 100% sure about that. That's a question that we would have to get back to you on with our technical guys. But you guys know how to get in touch with us. Call us sometime, and we can talk about that.
Okay.
I'm sorry I can't answer that specifically, Seema, but that is sort of down below the radar from where I was as far as the project. I trust my tech guys to do their tech things. I don't get into their technical details too much, but I got enough information from them to know about the building. There's the web model and there's the business model. They separated things along clean lines as far as where they needed programming and where they could just use the objects. And I know that the objects were available to GTS, so I'm sure that they're available for ECC.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. We definitely know. Yeah. Yeah. We definitely know how to contact. So we will come back. Okay.
Okay, there's a couple questions in the chat here. The first question is, do we need SAP licenses for each of our users who logs into the app?
That's a very good question. So what we discovered, and I can't speak for SAP, so you'll have to go through your account rep on it. I'll tell you what we did. Any business unit subject matter expert, BUSME, and any trade compliance ops person had to have a registered GTS license, because technically they were going to be logging into GTS to trigger their functionality and to work on their transactions. The work lists are actually reachable after logging into GTS. The web interface, on the other hand, for the originator registers as an internet user. So they're coming in just like those people who are doing the vendor declaration updates. They're just out in the world. You're sending a contact to them. You're allowing them to come into a screen view and actually enter some data in. It's not technically in GTS until the business unit SME puts it in GTS. So we were able to not have licenses for all those internet users, which was good. But again, you'll need to contact SAP for the specific answer to that question.
Okay, and then the next question is, can it run on all major browsers, such as IE, Firefox, Chrome, etc.?
We have only tested it in IE. I read something online earlier that it did not work with Chrome right now, but and I couldn't install Chrome on my on the laptop that we were using to get into the client system behind their firewall to do testing and all that. So I can't verify that right now that it does not work with Chrome, but I heard that somewhere, I read that somewhere.
Okay, and then the next question is, how did you handle country of origin and valuation for miscellaneous shipments?
So I purposely did not show country of origin fields on any of the slides except the one where we entered the product in and did the confirmation screen. The way we handled it was we expected the user to enter that data. So they're being expected to enter the value of the product and the country of origin. Now, they're not trade compliance people, and we know that. And we know that they don't understand the intricacies of how you determine country of origin, and they don't understand, how that's done in a lot of cases. But they can at least provide some information. Now, the business unit subject matter expert is expected to help validate that information. So we know that it's not going to be 100% correct every time, but we figured that was an acceptable risk as opposed to not doing anything. So we're asking them to do it on the transaction level, and that's in keeping with the standard GTS. GTS doesn't maintain country of origin as master data. It takes it from the transaction as it comes out of SAP or any other feeder system. Valuation, with a miscellaneous shipment, we're kind of asking people to guess. Most people, if they're shipping something and either they purchased it or they're getting it sort of out of the stock room or somewhere else, they probably know about how much it costs. So that's really sort of the best guess you can make is how much it costs, that's the value of it.
Okay, and the next question is this a licensable product from Entry Point, or is this something that would have to be built from scratch with Entry Point Consulting?
I think you want to contact the guy whose name is on this screen right here for the answer to that. I'm not hemming and hawing about the answer. I'm just saying that I don't have the answer to that question just right now. Obviously, the second part of the question, we could help you build it.
And next question is, can you explain how the solution compares to delivery without reference?
That's a good question because we have offered that as an option for people who have SAP feeder systems. In fact, I would still say that may be, if you have only an SAP feeder system, an ECC feeder system, that's probably a better option, really. And you might be surprised to hear that, but if you have only an ECC system, using the delivery without reference gives you a way to control it through ECC, through the GTS plugin coming out of ECC, and you get your master data management is done in ECC like the rest of your master data. But if you have outlying locations, if you have people who are employed by your company and they don't work within ECC and they still have to make these miscellaneous shipments, it may not be the best solution. But it's definitely a good solution because it uses the standard plug-in mappings, everything else that you would get from any other ECC type of document, like a standard delivery or standard sales order.
All right, I think that is all for the questions. If there's more on the phone line, wait just for a second. Oh, the next question is, how about adding multiple partners apart from the ultimate consignee?
That's easily done in the actual export declaration. So what we're mapping from the miscellaneous shipments application is obviously the person who's entering the shipment, the originator. We're mapping their name in. We're mapping in the origin location, the plant and the company code. We already have them mapped like standard GTS, so that creates the consignor and the I can't remember the name of it right now. The FTO and the plant go in as the two roles that they need to be on the export declaration in order to file the EIN number and that kind of thing in order for legal determination to take place. So those roles come over from the shipping request application just like they would with a standard document coming out of ECC or any feeder system. We can set up default rules to add in things like the ultimate consignee if there actually is no sort of attention to person coming out of the miscellaneous shipments application. Aside from that, any other partners like the carrier and those kinds of things, they can be added in GTS on the export declaration manually, or you can set up default rules to automatically add those.
Okay, looks like that was the last question. So this will conclude our webcast. I would like to thank Greg, our speaker for today, as well as the GTS leadership team for hosting this event. And thank you all for your participation. As mentioned earlier, the slides and recording link will be emailed to you and also be accessible on asug.com. Also, as Holly mentioned, the overview of the ASUG annual conference is available to register on asug.com in the events calendar, and that event is on April 2nd. So you can check that out, and you can also register for the ASUG annual conference at sapandasug.com. Have a great rest of your day.